much like a year ago, I suppose after yesterday's video, there really is no turning back. So yesterday I talked about what made me contemplate suicide. Now is when I share what saved my life, or more specifically, who saved my life. But to recap, for many, many years, up until I was 31, it was believed that I was on the autism spectrum. Because of that, my parents had put me in special ed, and it was during my time in high school, specifically my sophomore year, is when I slowly but surely began to contemplate the idea of, ending my life. I never really did talk over yesterday how the thing I think that bothered me the most about horse heads for me is because admittedly back when I was in high school, I was a bit of a, I guess you could say, a lovesick puppy. And, I really did want a girlfriend. I mean, in all fairness, I still do, but let's pretend that we're dealing with, young, slightly decent looking Nick color. How's that? Okay. So I think the one thing that legit bothered me the most was whenever I would go to like a high school dance, and I would ask girls to dance because I'm not a creep. And any girl that said yes, of course that was great, but did they say yes because they really wanted to dance with me, or did they say yes out of pity? I don't know. And that really always did bother me. And I'll talk more about that either tomorrow or next week when I continue this series. But between legitimately, not made fun of for it, but I could tell what the inflection in people's voice. I could tell what the inflection in people's voices were when they were insulting me. And between the chances of ever, meeting a girl, even when I was a senior in high school, at this point, far removed from being in special education, it still really bothered me. And I did mean what I said yesterday. Eventually, during when I was in college, I figured out what made Horsehead so different from, being a Trinity Polyana at Gettysburg College, and, special education was the disconnect. And because I figured out that my parents were the ones who put me in there, I really was mad at them to the point where for literally 2.5 years, I would outright refuse to say I love you to them. So you're probably thinking, what does that have to do with what I'm about to talk about today? Well, believe it or not, it was my parents who suggested that I do what I wound up doing. I'll never forget the day this happened. It was on Saturday in early to mid-September of 2007. and I was playing football. And that was actually another thing too. Admittedly, I never really was a good football player, but I think my career could have been a lot better for a number of different reasons. But that's a story for another time. It was my senior year, and we had a football game on Saturday. This is years before Horseheads even dreamed of having that new stadium it has now. So many games we had at home were always on Saturday afternoon. And that day, we had played a school from the Syracuse area known as Fayetteville Manlius. And they smoked us. Lost like 38-3. It was like 38-3. It was pretty bad when we lost to them. So I get home feeling horrible because of what happened, because we lost everything. And to make matters worse, since it's Saturday, and since this is before I was much more appreciative about going to church now than I was then, I'm already bummed out that, oh great, now we gotta go to church too. So I get home, I get out of my car, and I actually drove a Ford Explorer back then. It was green. I get out of my car, and my mom walks over towards me. And then she suggested something that I still can't believe she decided to do it then. My parents really never had been very good at timing. You'll see why in a second. So my mom suggests that I repeat my senior year at an all-boys prep school called Trinity Pauling. Now keep in mind, I had just come back from a football game in which my team lost. And I'm even more bummed about the fact that we're going to church. Do I look like I'm in any position to talk about my future right now? It actually turned out that my uncle on my mother's side actually went to prep school himself, specifically Trinity Pauling. So I wouldn't even realize it then, but I wound up being a legacy there, which is pretty cool. But here's where, honestly, this is around the time where I'm thinking, okay, that's it. I've had it. It's bad enough I'm not going to be able to, because here's the thing, I knew I was going to go to college. I hated going to school, but at least I knew I would get it done and over with, right, in 4 years. But now I'm going to Trinity Pauling, repeating my senior year, putting up with more, teenage angst than I ever really wanted to anymore. And to make matters worse, Trinity Pauling is an all-boys prep school. I mean, look, I was getting rejected by girls at Horseheads, make no mistake of that, but at least that was a numbers game. Eventually someone would have actually said yes to me. Don't know why, but they would have actually said yes to me. So, going to Trinity Pauling, I don't even have that going for me. And I really did try and rationalize why I really wanted to go. Such as there was this one kid who was kind of a bully to me that I always wanted to beat. I wanted to really impress the girl who I wound up taking to junior prom. I'll talk about that story probably tomorrow or probably Tuesday or next Wednesday. And actually, it would be next Monday or next Tuesday, never mind. Actually, it would be, never mind. So, I wanted to do it for those reasons. I really did want to believe I was going there to become a better person. But deep down I knew, okay, Trinity Pauling is where I'm going to do it. And so, on Tuesday, September 2nd, 2008, was when I headed up to Trinity Pawling. And keep in mind, of course I had been to Trinity Pawling, you know, a couple of times to check out the campus, do interviews and stuff like that. Of course I had to go through all that. That's what you're supposed to do. But fast forward to September 2nd, 2008. It was a Tuesday. And we drove to Trinity Pawling. And keep in mind, between the fact that this really would be the first time I'd ever really be separated from my family, as well as the fact that Trinity Pawling was probably where my life was going to end, a lot of emotions were going through me. What finally broke me, and I will never forget this moment, we're on the highway overlooking the Elmira area. And I get a call from my grandmother on my father's side. Just hearing her voice, thinking this is probably the last time I'm ever going to hear it, it got me. It got me hard, really hard. And so, at around, just a little around 12:30 in the afternoon, almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I finally arrived at Trinity Pawling. And within a few hours, I had my first cross-country practice. Now, I knew I was going to do cross-country before I got there, because Trinity Pawling can only take 4 postgraduates or PGs on their football team, and they picked out their 4 PGs long before they decided to have me. So I was, you know, relegated to do cross country, and of course I did train for it. In fact, full disclosure, I was actually doing 2-a-days before I got there. Nothing major, really. All I was doing was running like just under 3 miles. You know, 2.9 in the morning, 2.9 in the afternoon, which, yeah, if you really want to do well in cross country, it doesn't sound like a lot, but you have to remember, back when I was at the horse heads, I was a lineman playing football. Like, linemen are the reason why big football players have the stereotype that they have of, you know, being big. So, needless to say, it comes as no surprise that somebody like me would be the last person to really ever want to do cross country. But, you know, I went to Trinity Pawling for wrestling too. So I figured cross country was the best way to stay in shape for it. Now, within a few hours of arriving at Trinity Pawling, I had my first cross country practice. And long story short, I was put right to work. You know, between doing cross country, I was in the fall production of Black Comedy, and going to classes and doing all my schoolwork. Remember, this is prep school, therefore I have work to do, and I want to do a moderately good job at it. I grew to be so incredibly busy that I forgot what my objective was. Days, weeks, months went by, and we are already on the Fall Athletic Honors Awards. And we're just a few days away from going home for Thanksgiving. And little would I know that all of the hard work that I didn't even realize how important it was then was really starting to pay off. My grades were pretty good. I did really well in the fall production of Black Comedy. It was actually the first role I ever had where I had a legit character with speaking lines. You know, my acting career at Horseheads really wasn't as great as it should have been. Again, I'll talk about that in the coming days, or possibly tomorrow. But without fail, the crowning achievement of that fall trimester was, for all of my hard work running in cross country. Because remember, keep in mind, I was a lineman at Horseheads. I had no business even doing remotely well doing cross country. I wound up making the top 7. And I was given the Sean McCabe Award. During that, before I was about to receive that award, I'll never forget what my coach said. You know, a big, doughy guy who even I didn't expect as much from him. By the time the year was over, he was able to run a 5:30 mile. And he would tell me how, in order to ignore the pain in his legs, he would hit himself in the face. Which is true, by the way. I did legitimately do that. In front of all those people, my coach had said, if I had 7 guys like him, we'd win Founders. I had never known any kind of compliment like that in my entire life. I actually received more praise and recognition and camaraderie in that one evening than I did in any of the days at Horseheads. And yes, I am including senior year too. So, make no mistake, I was very proud of everything I accomplished. But I eventually got to thinking, this isn't going to last. Sooner or later, people are going to forget all about this and move on. Which, yeah, I can't deny that. That's 100% true. So that's why, and maybe this really was the depression thing. I mean, remember, I wouldn't know I would have depression until I'm 31, so this is years before that. Little, you know, we knew then, we knew now. That's when the contemplations of suicide went back on. To the point where I knew I was going to damn well do it. The questions were how and when. Considering at this time we're heading into Thanksgiving, and therefore the holiday season was right around the corner, and therefore we would go home for, you know, Christmas and such. I figured, you know, one last Christmas with the family, one last New Year's with the family. My birthday is December 28th, so we would celebrate me turning 19 at the time. So I figured, you know, one last hurrah with my family, tell them I love them, stuff like that. And when I returned to Trinity Pine in January of 2009, that's when, you know, that's when I'll do it. And believe me, I had a couple options. Specifically, full disclosure, the 2 biggest options I think that crossed my mind in terms of doing this were to either jump off of the 4th story of Cluid Building or go into the pond, obviously during the winter time where it'd be too cold to swim in, and therefore, you know, freeze to death. They may not be the most glamorous options, but that was something, right? And it's only by the grace of God I don't know how to tie a noose. So, the plan was to do it sometime in January of 2009. Now, at this point, you guys are probably thinking, Nick, it's December of 2022. What happened? What made you, you know, change your mind? What made you, you know, say to yourself, you know, you're not gonna do it anymore? The fact that at the time you are forever known in your mind, regardless of whether people remember it or not, that you're on the spectrum, and literally nothing you think of to make you feel better isn't working. Oh, trust me, when I say that, that's true. Because normally when you feel bad, you know, you think, okay, I'll watch like a good movie or a good show, get myself a snack, listen to some good music, read. Personally, I don't read, but I do know a lot of people who do get satisfaction out of reading, so there you go. Something that's going to take your mind off of why you're feeling bad and help you move on. When I say special education broke me from that, it broke me from that. Because nothing was making me feel better. And when that happens, you know how things could play out. So between all that, you're probably asking, what made you change your mind? Well, it just so happens that it occurred on this very day. What made me change my mind happened on this very day 14 years ago. Now, before I continue, I would like to point out that this series of events takes place over the span of several days, but it started today, on the 14th. That's why I reserved this particular video for today. I'll never forget this day. I remember it as if it only just happened 24 hours ago. It was a Saturday, and wrestling season for me was well into full swing. Remember, I went to Trinity Pauling for wrestling. Now, Trinity Pauling was actually invited to go to the Loomis Chaffee, that was the name of the school, Loomis Chaffee, dual meet tournament. Now, during my time at Horseheads, I've never been to a dual meet tournament. This is years before Horseheads would be as good at wrestling as it is now. I had never been to a dual meet tournament. So this was a brand new experience for me. Not to mention, this was the first, time during my time at Trinity Pauling where, tournaments were happening in pretty rapid succession of each other, and matches were happening more and more. 1 week prior to the Loomis Chaffee dual meet tournament, my final match the week before at the Canterbury Christmas Invitational, which, fun fact about Canterbury, Paris Hilton actually went there. Neat, huh? Oh, people knew Paris Hilton went there, but this is when Paris Hilton was famous for being famous. So they were kind of trying to distance themselves a little bit. Don't get me wrong, Paris Hilton's cool now, but at the time it was, kind of business a little bit. But, sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. So, my final match at the Canterbury Christmas Invitational was an opponent from one of Trinity Pauling's greatest rivals, Avon Old Farms. It's another all-boys school in Connecticut. Yeah, for those of you wondering, Trinity Pauling is near the Connecticut border, near Danbury, for those of you who want to know where that is. And I had lost to this kid in literal sudden death. A very, very, very close match. So, I had an opportunity to face this kid again a week later at the Loomis Chaffee dual meet tournament. To make things even more special, this was the first time my father had come down to see me wrestle for the blue and the gold. That's the Trinity Pauling School colors, blue and gold. So, an opportunity to rematch a kid I lost to a week prior. And my father in the stands cheering me on. Not to mention the brand new experience of being at a dual meet tournament. I wasn't going to let this opportunity pass me by. I wound up going 3-1 for the day. Admittedly, one of those wins was a forfeit, but a win is still a win in my book, because I will admit I really wasn't as good as I would have liked to be. I didn't really start having the drive to get better at wrestling until I was a junior in high school. between all that happening, I wasn't going to let this opportunity pass me by. I wound up going 3-1 over the course of the day. My father took me back to Trinity Pauling, and we wound up going to dinner at this one place called Putnam Diner. It's actually a really good diner with, it serves like breakfast 24 hours a day and stuff like that. It was just really, really good. If you're ever in that area, I highly recommend you try Putnam Diner. My father took me home, and I knew I was going to see him the next day. It was going to be a pretty nice, relaxing day overall. You know, we'll get some schoolwork done and all that. On the surface, it sounds like a pretty perfect day. And in a lot of aspects, it was. Now, I know at this point, this is where I should probably tell you, I really wish the story ends here. But sadly, there's more. The next morning, on the 15th, and keep in mind, considering how good the day before was, you would think, you know, that's a pretty good story, but I don't really see how it changed your mind about suicide. Wait for it. So, it's the morning of December 15th. I'm in the lounge area of my dorm, which is Dunbar. I'm laying on the couch, you know, looking at the TV. And sometimes when I was at Trinity Pauling, we would have a Sunday chapel, but this weekend we weren't supposed to. So you can imagine my surprise when my dorm parent, who is also the soccer coach at Trinity Pauling, as well as my track coach, because I did track at Trinity Pauling too, walks in and he tells me that I have to go to the chapel. And, you know, my dorm parent was a very good man, but I could, you know, he wouldn't, you know, he helped take me in when I first arrived at Trinity Pauling. Therefore, I can trust him. So I walk over to the chapel and, you know, sit in pretty much the usual area where I sit in. Really, there was a bunch of places in chapel I sat at, let's be real here. I should have realized what was about to happen when I looked to my left and saw one of my best friends at Trinity Pauling and how he looked. Now, this particular person was from Canada, and he had a naturally pale complexion, but this was different. This guy looked as if he had seen a ghost. I didn't think much of it at the time. You know, maybe whatever's wrong with him may have nothing to do with what's about to happen. Boy, would I wind up being wrong about that. So the headmaster appears and tells us some words. I couldn't possibly tell you, for the life of me, what he said, with the exception of the very end. Because he had told us that one of our classmates, one of our brothers, died last night. Like, I could still feel the shock of, did we really just hear this? Did that really just happen? All throughout the chapel. Like, there was nary a sound. I could feel the chill, the tension. Just the thought of, he's got to be lying. There's no way we just heard what we just heard. And sure enough, it was true. One of our brothers died that very night. His name was Andrew Einstein. And over the span of the next several days, if you were to tell me what I would witness during that time, I would probably never believe you. But between the funeral memorial service we had for him, which it was actually really interesting. We had, because Trinity Pauling is an Episcopalian school, which, you know, is a sub, which is, you know, part Christianity, which was fine with me because, you know, I'm Catholic. And, you know, we had a service with him, but there was also a rabbi there because Andrew Einstein's mother was I'm pretty sure she's still alive, so before you use present tense, is Episcopalian, and his father is Jewish, which, admittedly, with the name like Einstein, I probably could have pieced that together. It just, I mean, not to sound kind of bad or anything, but you never know if a person's Jewish unless they tell you. And you can't just simply walk up to someone and say, "Hi, are you Jewish?" It doesn't work that way. So, yeah, I didn't know. Between the funeral service that we had in the coming days, the a cappella group known as the Trinitones singing the alma mater, and seeing all of my brothers come together the way they did. And I want to iterate something, because it's probably going to come across that, oh, we went to church, you know, a white guy going to a prep school, where have we seen that before? Let me tell you something. Trinity Pauling had a multitude of different races, religions, skin color, you name it. And throughout those several days before we went home for winter break, because this actually happened right before I went for winter break, my brothers are hugging, they're crying, they had each other's backs. And now you know why I say that every day, in case that sounds familiar. From everything I saw, I told myself two things. The first is I asked myself, if it had been me who had done this, if I had taken my life, would these gentlemen be weeping for me like they're weeping for him? I don't know. And it was then I told myself the other thing. And that's, I'm never going to know. Because I can't do that to these guys. So I didn't. And before I go any further, I should probably tell you my experience with Andrew Einstein, because I actually did know him okay, fairly well. See, he was actually my teammate on the cross-country team. I mentioned earlier how I won the Sean McCabe Award. He actually won the Coaches Award. Without question, an argument actually could have been made that Andrew Einstein was the fastest kid on the team. And he wasn't even there for cross-country. He was actually there for lacrosse. And, well, keep on, lacrosse at Trinity Pauling has always been huge, but this was really huge. Like, before I arrived, the year before, Trinity Pauling had won New England's in lacrosse. Winning New England's in lacrosse would be the equivalent of, say, Horseheads High School winning states. So when I tell you it was pretty huge, it was pretty huge. Which kind of made it funny when lacrosse didn't really do that well that year. Fun fact, it was actually where I learned what the term laxbro means. Again, I was pretty oblivious back then. Not to mention, one of my favorite memories with Andrew Einstein was, we're doing warm-ups, right? And we're trying to come up with funny names of the dormitories. And there's this one dorm called Barstow. And then I'm like, wait, how about Bar Stoners? Andrew Einstein was the only one who had my back and laughing at that. He legitimately thought it was funny. And he was actually the very first person I ever met from the state of South Carolina. So, ladies, he had the accent. I have to mention the accent because ladies love the accent. Don't know why, they just do. And it was just a shock that he was gone. Especially when considering that he was a lacrosse player. He had a girlfriend, you know, from what I heard. You know, not to mention, considering what I just told you all yesterday and how it was believed I was on the spectrum and how my life was completely miserable. You know, I thought I had every right to do what he did, comparatively. But the only reason why I didn't do it was because I was just waiting for the right time. But because of what wound up happening, there's never going to be a right time. Because I'm not going anywhere. I really would love to tell you that this is where the story ends. Well, if we're really being technical, the story ends the day I finally pass on, which will hopefully not be for a very, very, very long time. And so, you're probably expecting some sort of happy ending when, in all fairness, that's not really how it works. Because, remember, Andrew had passed away right before he went home for winter break, during the bitter cold. We still had to go back and go through the rest of that year. Fast forward to actually April of that year, and Andrew Einstein's parents came for a visit, and they told us a lot of really fun facts about Andrew. How, you know, he loved playing lacrosse and other sports. How he was very much into his home state of South Carolina, to the point where our graduating senior caps had, I forget the name of the symbol, but it's the one with the tree and the crescent moon, and I forget what it's called. Someone's going to point that out. And during his funeral, there were hundreds, if not thousands of people were there. The governor of South Carolina came to his funeral, which, that's pretty cool. So, in those years since, man, have I been through a lot. And believe me, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, let me tell you. Because forever going forward, I would have to live with the fact that that could have been me. I have to live with that for the rest of my life. Not to mention, you know, all throughout college, I struggled with my grades. I had gotten, well, really, I lost 2 jobs working at Robert Packer Hospital in Sayre. One I got terminated from, although I would make the case it was unjust. And the other I had to quit, or otherwise I would have been fired from that too. And, 14 years later, you can make the case that I'm still a single loser. But believe me when I tell you that for every, bad thing that's happened, there's been good that's happened too. Real good. Damn good even. I mean, I'm proud to say that in these 14 years, I am proud to have met many extraordinary people. Whether it was from Trinity Pauling, from Horseheads, from Gaysborough College, all that. I got to meet those people. I rode my bike for 100 miles for charity, as well as ran the Wine Glass Marathon 4 times in back-to-back years. And keep in mind, riding 100 miles for the Tour de Huca and running the full Wine Glass Marathon, that's not even 3 months apart. I did that. I'm probably the only person who's really been able to do it, much less 4 times in a row. So, yeah, that's pretty great. I got to live to see the end of the Harry Potter movies. I got to live to see the Marvel Cinematic Universe unfold the way it has, with movies like Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man No Way Home. Not to mention, I got to see my brother get engaged, get married, and start a family. And that's the thing right there. All of that, I get to say I did. Let me say that again. I get to say that. All that I did, the graduating from college, the 4 marathons and 100-mile bike rides for charity that I did, the fact I got to see my brother become a family man. Or better yet, just this year, I became a godfather. I can tell you, nobody ever thought that would happen to me. Hell, I didn't believe it either. But I did. And all because, while it was under the worst possible circumstances, Andrew Einstein saved my life. Through the collective unity and bonding and getting together the way my brothers did. My brothers saved my life. It's actually on my bucket list to one day go down to South Carolina, where Andrew Einstein has been laid to rest, and bring a bouquet of flowers to his grave, which I was actually going to, because remember I mentioned how he was very much into his home state of South Carolina. So the bouquet of flowers I would have picked would have been the state flower of South Carolina, which, fun fact, is known as the yellow jessamine. It's actually a very pretty flower. You should look it up. And before I continue, earlier last November, my cousin had gotten married. And there's always been this one traditional Irish blessing that I was going to say should I ever get to Andrew Einstein's grave and place said bouquet of flowers. And that blessing was actually uttered at my cousin's wedding. And that blessing goes as follows. And keep in mind, trust me when I tell you, this is the part where it usually gets me. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be ever at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain falls softly on your fields. And until we meet again, may the Lord hold you in the palm of his hand. Suffice to say, I started crying at my cousin's wedding too when I heard that. And that's what got me. I think the one thing that's really been most rewarding for me making all these videos for as long as I have is the fact that I get to say this story. Let me repeat. I get to say this story. And it's probably going to come across as, well, Nick, you tell this story every year. Why do you need to do it every year? I mean, it's a very important story, but, you know, one time would be enough. Because, I mean, thanks to the internet, you could always look it up and, you know, see for yourself. Especially when, you know, let's be real here. I can't remember every single time I tell this story. I always wind up missing, you know, a few words, or maybe I could have worded something a little differently or explained things better. I get that. I could reword this story many times for the rest of my life. But the one thing that it'll never do is take away from the message. Because let's be frank here, as much as we love to believe that the holiday season is, quote unquote, the most wonderful time of year, a lot of people get really depressed at this time of year. Whether, you know, they're separated from their loved ones. In fact, full disclosure, I know a very dear friend of mine who just lost their mother. You know, it's tragic. Or worse off, there are people out there who unfortunately don't have a lot. And therefore they have nothing to be blessed or thankful for. So I want to believe that the reason why I say this story every year is, if you are ever feeling this way, if you really are thinking that, you know, life isn't worth living anymore, for the love of God, talk to somebody, anyone. There's a reason, in fact, there's a reason why I say I'll always be here to lend an ear, because you better believe if you need to talk, I will listen to you. I've been there, so I know. I don't know if I have all the answers for you, but I'll listen to what you have to say. And trust me, that really will mean a lot more than to do absolutely nothing. So, if I were to ever do the whole Trinity Pauling thing all over again, yeah, I would. Knowing what I know now. Of course, knowing what I know now, I would do everything I can to save Andrew Einstein. But, you know, that's simply not how it works. So in case anyone's ever wondering, now you know why I owe so much to Trinity Pauling for this. I couldn't possibly describe how great it is. what it wound up doing for me. That's why, while I haven't really talked about that much lately, I will forever be thankful for it. Because I've met some extraordinary people at Trinity Poly, and really, just recently in the last year, I've met some extraordinary people and got to know them better. It's been wonderful. Which reminds me, if you've ever contemplated suicide and gotten over it, watching It's a Wonderful Life really hits harder. Trust me. So, there's a lot more I do need to talk about, but I feel as if I may have said enough already. So, much like yesterday, I am beyond humbled that I got to share this video with all of you today. I am hopeful that you take this story, take its message, and should you ever need it, use it to help you. And always remember, if you ever are feeling this way, please go talk to someone, anyone. You'd be surprised who out there will listen to what you have to say. You know, you have family, you have friends, siblings, someone, medical professionals. Like, someone is going to be out there to help you. Even if it's as simple as just giving some mildly good advice. Because that's more than anything, that's a hell of a lot more than nothing. So please, do it. Talk to someone. Because whenever I see anyone lose a loved one, I always say, talking your feelings out, sharing your feelings, that really is some of the best medicine for you. And you'd be surprised how much it works for me. Because I've talked about it before, I do see a therapist, and funny enough, I'm actually seeing my therapist later today. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I love sharing my feelings. It's great. Or you know what? Have yourself a good cry. Hey, listen, watch the movie Inside Out, and I will tell you, crying is the most beautiful human thing you can do. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. If anyone does say otherwise, you can punch them in the face. You got my permission. Kids, actually don't do that. Kids, don't go punch people in the face. Don't do that. But you at least have my permission to tell them off. How you go about telling them off is your business. Do something to make you feel better. Yes, it's Christmas time, and it can be very depressing. But there are plenty of opportunities also to help you get over it or make you feel good. In fact, full disclosure, a dear friend of mine who, from Horseheads, I really do consider to be the GOAT of cheerleaders, she's getting married like today, I think, in Jamaica, or like somewhere down south, tropical or whatever. That is cool. So shout out to my friend there. That is awesome. So, to my friend who is getting married today, I mean, I could say that Irish blessing again, but I think it would kind of ruin it may potentially ruin the happy vibe. So, I'll just say, I hope that today goes extremely well for you and your husband. And may you both have the time of your lives for the rest of your lives. And I should probably sign off here before I completely run out of storage on my phone camera. So, take care, everyone. I'll see you tomorrow. And in the words of my perspectives and drugs teacher at Horseheads, make good choices. Have a nice day.